as a venture cap. Oh, great. Yeah, this
Yeah.
is my 12th year as a venture-backed entrepreneur. So previously, I founded and sold a menswear brand, took it from seed stage to Series B to acquisition. And as part of that, ended up implementing, a customer experience team. So went through all the classics versions of software, Desk.com before their acquisition by Salesforce. Later on switched over to Zendesk. Answered a lot of customer service tickets myself, wrote a lot of emails, and now I run another company, but on the side, I also I'm personally deeply curious about the impact of generative AI on our society and just on our workforces in general. And I write my own blog on the side, and I think it was because of a blog I wrote about this really interesting paper we are going to discuss today that I got put in touch with Chyngyz. So I'm always happy to collaborate with other entrepreneurs about a topic I'm deeply passionate about and have firsthand experienced, which is the kind of customer support and customer experience. And how do you really deliver something that's elevated and differentiated as the landscape continues to evolve? So looking forward to sharing a lot of thoughts there in the context of today's paper.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. So for those who don't know me, I'm Chyngyz. I'm a co-founder and CEO at Kodif. At Kodif, we think a lot about empowering support teams with data, contextual data, AI, and automations. So, and for us, this LLM is very interesting and like groundbreaking technology. So we're excited to discuss this as well. And let me start sharing my screen. So yeah, as we mentioned, so we're going to be discussing the, GPT-3, GPT-3's impact on support agents' productivity. Spoiler alert: the support agent productivity went up by 35%. And yeah, so let me take a step back and basically, kind of go through quickly on the history of language models. So language models are not new. So they started in 1950s. They've been around, but the groundbreaking changes, I think, as we all know, happened in 2017 when the famous paper from Google came out, and when OpenAI started building these transformers, and then the GPT-3 and other GPT-4 language models came out. So I think the basic kind of takeaway is that the language models have been around for a while, but the biggest changes, those changes which I think will impact the society, different, knowledge workers in different industries, I think they happened in the end of 17, 18, and in 2020, 21, this new practical models came out. So they've been around, but we're, I think, living in a very exciting time now. And one thing I want to mention here as well, I think Michael will, discuss this as well, that, GPT 3.5 was amazing. Everyone was just fascinated by it. But at the same time, and this paper is basically studying the effect of GPT-3 on customer support's productivity. But when GPT-4 came out, we believe that the results, the impact will be even more profound. So that's what we're excited about as well. And here's some things I think what GPT-4 does better than GPT-3. Some things like 80% more accuracy. They did some different tests, and so for example, I remember for GRE, when it's an exam you have to pass to get into a graduate program. GPT-4 was around 80% more accurate, and there were a series of tests like that. The reply time cuts by half, and also it's multimodal, unlike GPT-3, so you can analyze image inputs and a bunch of other things. You can kind of guide it. You can give more instructions and make basically steer the model where you want. Higher response word limit as well, and support of a lot of languages as well. From our work, we see that major languages are the best because there's more data, and as you know, like GPT was trained on like a lot of data from internet. So the more content there for a specific language, the stronger the model gets. And we compared, and then we found that around 32 languages are really good. So I'm from Kyrgyzstan originally, and Kyrgyz language is a small language, but Russian language, which is a larger language, has a much better accuracy and results. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But yeah, I think here's to Michael.
Yeah. So we're going to jump into the paper now, and I'll spend a bit of time decomposing what's most interesting about the paper. And just to give everyone a sense, I like to read a lot of these research papers in my spare time. I think sometimes because I really believe the most important material in these research papers oftentimes doesn't get flagged by the mainstream media. Many of these never make it into the news at all. Or I think more concerningly, sometimes they have a lot of great content, but the researchers authoring it end up burying the main points deep in the paper instead of actually putting them up front. And I think that's an outcome of, I think, how the research industry in general works with some of the papers. I think this is a great example of that. This is a 58-page in total research paper with a number of kind of quite complex charts. And some of the details that I was able to distill out that really mattered, I found relatively late into kind of the research paper's kind of description of the kind of the methodology and how they approached it. Um, One major reason I do believe this paper is worth highlighting is right now we're living in an era where there's a lot of, I would call it BS being written about generative AI, right? So there's a lot of companies out there making tall claims about what it can do. It's not every day, go on LinkedIn and you see someone saying Google, it's the end of Google tomorrow, or ChatGPT is old news, right? And I see these clickbait type titles, and my own personal motivation in looking at the actual research that's come out of the industry is because this is where the innovative stuff is. And even in looking at a research paper, I like to ask myself, what is it about this research paper that makes it credible and interesting? So the reason I'm here talking about this is I really think this piece of research meets all of those criteria. And let's kind of dive in and kind of really talk about why, right? First of all, this is the first paper I've read that actually looks at the customer support world in a very, very kind of scientific and kind of broad manner. And a lot of people have made a lot of claims about the customer support world and what AI tools can do. This one is actually kind of written from a research perspective by scientists, and I'd say generally trying to take as unbiased of a view as possible. So it's not sponsored by any particular company. This is written by academic researchers from Stanford and MIT who are able to partner along, have access to unfiltered raw data as part of an enterprise chat tool deployment across over 5,000 customer support agents, many of them located overseas at a Fortune 500 company. And that is something else that stood out to me too, which is this was not done in an academic lab setting. And I really, really want to stress that's what makes this paper relatively unique, in that a lot of the research that is coming out about generative AI right now uses incredibly small sample sizes, uses lab settings. And the first question I get when I read those papers is, gosh, like, well, they certainly prove the very narrow point, but how is this actually going to perform in the real world? And here, for the first time, I think we have an incredible longitudinal study of how large language models like GPT-3 are able to actually accelerate agent productivity. One big caveat I want to note, which as I was talking to Chyngyz, I thought was a big advantage of some of the stuff he's building, is that this study was based upon software which at the time was using GPT-3. And because they used a two-phase study about 5 months before deploying AI, they actually tracked and measured the agents and analyzed all of their conversations. And for about 5 to 7 months after they deployed AI systems, they also measured the agents. 3.5 and GPT-4 were not available, right? GPT-4 only came out 3 months ago. 3.5 only launched in late November with the launch of ChatGPT as well. So we're looking at a slightly outdated large language model, but the fact that it was able to produce the results it did is nonetheless impressive. And I like to think, I like to wonder the question, well, what's going to happen in the next 2 years at the pace that large language models are now evolving? So I really want to highlight that, yes, it is an older language model, but in essence, the results we're talking about should be even better under GPT-4 and future large language model power softwares. And then the last thing to really highlight is this is a robust study. Several months were performance were measured pre-AI deployment. Several months were measured post-AI deployment. They meaningfully deployed the AI tool in batches of different agents to not overwhelm the entire agent force. So this is very much a very considered and thoughtful kind of study that really looked at real world deployment and thought about a lot of these real world complexities. And the amount of data they captured is simply incredible. 3 million conversations were captured as part of the study. So once again, real world applications, but also the denominator of what they were able to capture and measure is just a very, very large amount. And I think they were able to get a lot of richness out of the study as a result. So once again, I think, I always like to talk about the parameters of any report because the parameters tell me if a report is credible or not, if I should pay attention to it, what are the caveats. And what I like to really say if this one is, there really aren't a lot of caveats to ultimately kind of, take away from kind of the study. I think this is a relatively robust study. All studies can always be improved, but they I think really did a great job here and invested, I can only imagine, a lot of their own time. So what's the main takeaway? As kind of Chyngyz already, spoiler posted earlier, AI was able to improve customer agent service agent productivity, right? And average handle time was reduced, and number of resolutions per hour increased. And that's like, I think, the TLDR to kind of really take away, which is unsurprisingly, but now we have a study that shows us at scale. We can see how this actually kind of was impacted across a broad number of agents, as you can see here, a total of 5,179 agents across 3 million conversations and 133 teams. Notably, only 11% of those agents were United States-based, as you can see. So this also maybe ties into kind of, how can large language models actually create leverage with non-native English speakers? And this also shows some really, really interesting learnings as a result, because they were able to dramatically improve the performance of what were primarily overseas agents servicing US customers in English-speaking audiences. So if we move on to the next slide here, we've extracted a number of charts from the study. And this one, I think, kind of shows a number of kind of shifts, right? So resolutions per hour increased, not a surprise. Average handle time decreased, as you can see there too. And the number of chats per hour that agents were able to handle also increased as well. The resolution rate of cases, as you can see, slightly increased in the post-AI period. And what was really interesting about here too is the customer satisfaction, the NPS, also increased as well, right? And this is tied to, I think, a large language model's ability to consistently produce high quality written outputs, even when a human being is tired. And at the same time, I think in this case, especially with non-native English speakers, dramatically, I think, clean up and improve any outputs that are purely human written in order to create a more consistent tone. So there's a wonderful future here where I think generative AI can really adopt different companies' styling. They can kind of, draw from someone's brand book, from someone's messaging, and I think really be able to play the part of different personas. I think that's especially powerful, like a GPT-4 versus even 3.5. And I think this is a factor that should only go up as companies find that they're able to consistently offer a certain tone of voice and a certain brand tone as they kind of deploy AI across their support agents. If we go on and move on to the next set of charts, I think this is what's also really interesting as well, which is the researchers broke the agents across different skill cohorts and discovered that AI was actually able to most dramatically elevate the skill level of the lower skilled agents. And by lower skilled agents, they meant agents with the least seasoned time on the teams who likely needed more ramp time than ever to be able to reach the skill level of higher quality agents. And not only their baseline metrics just increased across the board, if we move on to the next slide, as a result, what's most interesting that AI was able to create, if you look at the rightmost kind of diagram, is that the language that the lower skilled agents used became increasingly similar to high skilled workers that had been there for several years in the post AI period. So you can see the red dots refer to the post AI period, and chart on the y-axis the level of similarity between responses given by low skilled agents and high skilled agents. And I think what's especially important to note there is my own personal journey has taught me training folks to be consistently good at delivering high quality responses, especially in the support industry where turnover can oftentimes be high and the job can be grueling, especially if you're processing a large number of tickets. It's challenging, and it's challenging to get to that bar. And the fact that I think this AI now serves as this incredible leveling tool to get earlier employees trained faster to create more consistent outputs. Really, really kind of fascinating kind of research result to come out of this for what even GPT-3 kind of in its more nascent form was able to do. So I think I really, really want to highlight this can oftentimes, I think, in a labor constrained environment, support faster ramp times of individuals on teams. And if we move on to the kind of the last slide here, where we talk about the study, you'll see that, I think the overall takeaway should be the researchers really concluded that AI is this wonderful co-pilot. So really, really important to highlight this. They are not studying, can AI outright replace customer support agents? The study was very much conducted from the perspective of, can AI really play a support perspective to support agents and just help them do a better job? So humans are ultimately still in control. And as you can see, they they detected numerous areas where AI and AI suggestions and sample AI outputs could vastly help support agents in real time troubleshoot issues and deliver better responses. And once again, GPT-3 I think has a limited context window. It's more limited in its ability to understand customer inputs and then be able to process advanced outputs. And as large language models continue to evolve, we should expect this area to evolve very, very quickly with that. So I'm very excited to, I think, see what the next generation of customer support tools can do. But as you can see, it's both incredibly useful for figuring out how to take very, maybe very complex customer interactions and directly link that to, articles from a knowledge base. Oftentimes where maybe customer support agent might deliver the wrong knowledge-based response because they're trying to interpret a complex ask, or in many cases to an AI suggested response, which as we kind of saw earlier, if customer support agents utilize that, is able to create a more consistent tone and even higher customer NPS, which matters tremendously kind of at the level of volume of tickets they were engaging at. So that's really it, right? We pulled out a lot of, I think, interesting kind of results from the study, but I'll turn it back to Chyngyz now to talk about maybe some of the use cases, kind of he thinks AI can bring in the next generation here.
Sure. Thanks, Michael. Super helpful. Also, just to kind of, build on top of what you said about the context window. So Anthropic, released their, 100,000 window context, I think a month ago, and which is a big deal because I think now you can just, feed your huge, library of knowledge-based articles and basically train your, LLM on top of it. So I guess, GPT-3, GPT-4, I think there's I think they're on around 4,000 tokens right now, and Anthropic's 25x of that. I think it's a very exciting wave as well. And I hope, we were talking to a few people from OpenAI, I think this is coming as well from OpenAI. So I think everything is changing so fast. So, and there's so many things I think to I'm sure like next year this time we'll be sitting and thinking, oh wow, how many things have happened since we talked. Some of the use cases we see which could empower agents. So a couple of things is where software GPT-3 LLMs can be helpful is turning any manual complex workflows into a single click, which is taking very large SOP and building a kind of decision tree which can kind of turned into actions. Also generating responses based on knowledge-based articles and previous interactions. So for here we see that you could leverage your previous interactions, and for example even you can highlight those interactions your customers rated as a high NPS. So you can feed those answers to your LLM, and they can be used to respond to your customers. Also, knowledge base, agents won't be spending a lot of time understanding where to find the relevant article, but it could be easily surfaced to them and even generate a response. Basically, think of it as a dynamic macros. Zendesk and all the ticketing platforms, they have macros, but this one would be real-time dynamic macros using LLM. Also, sometimes note taking when a conversation is happening over the phone. Taking notes, it might be sometimes too manual and it might take too much time. And summarizing those notes could be helpful too. So yeah, I mean, there are a lot of resources to kind of to tap into. I think around this, I think Michael writes a blog on AI, and sometimes Michael sees applications. I think in generative AI for customer support, he puts some stuff there. Also, we have published a white paper on use cases in customer support for generative AI. So check this out as well. And of course, you can always read this paper if you want to kind of dig deeper and understand the results of it. But this is pretty much it. So I think we want to go through the paper, which we did, and discuss some of the use cases. And let me stop sharing my screen, and maybe we will take some questions from the audience. Yeah. Also, we did run a small poll on just learn from the audience as well. And so one question we asked was which. So let me publish this result. So yeah, one question was which area of customer support do you believe AI can have the most significant impact on? And a lot of people replied automated chatbots for basic questions. A few people replied sentiment analysis for customer feedback. And I think same number of people replied that personalized recommendations, which is pretty cool. Let me, yeah, chatbots are, I think, is definitely the use case. And I think what we see here at Kodif too is, the old school chatbots, which were based on like mostly on keywords. They were harder to maintain and harder to build. But this one's, because of LLMs, you can just build in like 10, 15 minutes. So, which is pretty exciting thing as well. And another, okay, so this is, the second question was, are you currently using any AI-powered solutions in your customer support operations? Most voted was no, but we're considering it. And a few people replied that they're already using AI-powered solution. So yeah, I think definitely we see a trend here, so that people are looking into it and studying it. So yeah, I think this is it on my end. Michael, do you have anything to add here? Oh, I think we have a question here. There are many new GPT-based customers. There's a question from the audience. There are many GPT-powered support tools springing up every day. How do you recommend evaluating this against one another to assess the right tools by exploring for a customer support operation? That's a very good question. I think, yeah, I'll take this. So you're right. I think there are a lot of tools kind of, popping up pretty much every day. I guess it all kind of, comes from your needs, like what you're trying to solve, right? Because there are different platforms and for different use cases. So we see that, kind of there's also, like, I think one of the questions we always ask is, what are you trying to solve? And we see that there are broadly two buckets of, customer support operations. One bucket when customer support agents are spending most of their time on active handling of tickets, which is basically, transactional business, getting refund requests. Then most of the time agents spend on active handling. They would go like into one system, they would, switch multiple tabs and then go and, process a refund or something. But there's another bucket, the second bucket, how we kind of frame it at Kodif. It's companies where, it requires a deeper look into customers' questions. So, and so, for example, it requires investigation, and the active handling of the ticket in itself, it takes maybe 10% of the total resolution time. So I think AI tools are so if you're, most of your tickets are in the first bucket, maybe the best way to think about using AI is, deflecting this high volume tickets and automating them and enabling your customers to self-serve. But if this is the second, if you're, operating in the second environment, ticket environment, which is like a bit more complex, which requires deeper investigation into, the customer's issue, then probably AI Copilot could be helpful. I think the first question is like, what type of application you want to use, customer facing or agent facing? Are you trying to empower your agents, or you're trying to reduce the tickets that are, coming into your ticketing system? So I think that's kind of the first question. The second question is, your AI, vendor will be as good as your data. So I think your data should be ready. So and here I think you can do a lot of prep work to make sure that it's in a good place. And I think when it comes to your selection, I guess whenever you decided the application, whenever you are ready with your data, you can just then engage with your vendors and ask them questions like, of course, privacy, security, it's a table stakes with AI. So it definitely has to be, compliant with SOC 2 Type 2, HIPAA compliance if you're in healthcare, GDPR if you're in Europe. So a bunch of this compliance stuff should be, should be there. In terms of business impact, I think the ROI in real case studies, I think something I think to take definitely you have to take a look. Yeah, I guess that's kind of the high level of how I would, suggest to look into AI tools. Michael, anything you might want to add?
No, I think that's a great way to frame it. You really have to think about what they're developing on top of it. There's many companies doing just a wrapper around GPT-4, and there's a lot of companies, I think, taking it one level farther.
Yeah, totally. Cool. I think this is it. Thanks everyone for attending. And yeah, see you in the next webinar or workshop. Thank you. Thanks, Michael.